And hit me with
Great.
it. And I just met him. It's like, so you always around the area? Yeah, we're always around.
Good evening. Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting for February 28th, 2022. We will open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Pollock? Here. Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallensack?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. Also present tonight is Mayor Michael J. Safarian, City Administrator Michael Beasley, Clerk of Council Tina Evans, Law Director Melissa Pecora, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Commissioner of Rec Tim Borton, and Finance Director Darlene Huntermark. Council, the first order of business will be the approval of the meeting minutes from February 14th, 2022.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves,
I move to approve the minutes from February 14, 2022 of our regular council meeting.
thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Any objections? Meeting minutes for meeting minutes for February 14th, 2022 have been approved. Council, since we did not have a committee of the whole meeting last week, we need to add items number 16 and 27 through 39.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves,
I move to add items 16, item 27 through 39 to this week's meeting.
thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? Hearing none, items 16 and 27 through 39 will be added to this week's agenda. The first two items up tonight will be 16 and 27. These will be presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Commissioner of Parks and Recreation Tim Borton. And I will go to Mr. Borton on item 16 to begin with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just an ordinance allowing us to get bids for uniforms. And the purpose of this, in the past, we have spent more than $25,000 with some of these vendors, not on any individual purchase, but just over the course of the years of ordering uniforms, we have exceeded that in some cases. So just to be clear and upfront, we're just putting this into an ordinance that we're receiving bids from these companies for uniforms.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any comments or questions for Mr. Borton? Hearing none, I will assign item 16, 2022 as ordinance 16, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the Parks and Recreation Commissioner to enter into price determining contracts with Ad Choice Incorporated, BSN Sports Incorporated, Clear Images, Mr. Emblem, RCX Sports LLC, Riddell All-American, and Team Sports for uniforms on a per item basis through December 31, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 16 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 16, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item will be 27, 2022, and I will also defer to Mr. Borton for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just for our lawn care services on our baseball fields, soccer fields, the common areas around the Coons Complex. We went out for bid. We received 3 bids that we felt met our criteria. And the quote from Outdoor Home Services was met the best bid criteria. So moving forward for lawn care services for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any questions for Mr. Borton? Hearing none, I will assign item 2722 as ordinance 27-2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and commissioner of recreation and parks to issue a purchase order to Outdoor Home Services LLC, doing business as True Green, P.O. Box 9001033, Louisville, Kentucky, for fertilization and weed control during 2022 season in the amount of $27,315 and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 27-2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second?
Second by Mr. Horniak. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote from council, please?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
yes,
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 27-2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item for passage is item 28-2022, presented by Mayor Michael J. Safran and Law Director Melissa Pura. Mayor, would you like me to? Ms. Pura?
thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is for the electric supply for residential and small commercial users. As everyone knows, the City of Oregon has been part of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, certified governmental aggregator since 2000. The city is also a member of the Northwest Ohio Aggregation Coalition, NOAC, as well as several other neighboring communities. Being part of this aggregation has resulted in an estimated savings to all NOAC residential and small commercial participants over $86 million. The NOAC's current agreement with Energy Harbor expires in May of 2022, and NOAC's energy consultant, Palmer Energy, has recently issued an RPF to residential and small commercial customers to 8 suppliers. After reviewing the RPF proposals that have been returned by 3 companies, they looked at what the lowest cost electricity would be. They have reviewed the proposals, and there's 2 companies that NOAC is looking at, Dynegy and Energy Harbor. This would be for a 36-month term. This ordinance would allow Palmer to go ahead and see which one of those 2 companies could provide the best savings for the small commercial customers for the city of Oregon. And again, that would be for a 36-month term savings. Exhibit A does explain that in more depth. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Council? Hearing no questions on item 28, I will assign item 28 as ordinance 28-2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into a customer supply agreement for the provision of electric energy to residential and small commercial customers within the city of Oregon and declaring an emergency.
Council?
Mr. President,
Ms. Polliff?
I move for passage of ordinance number 28 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thanks, Ms. Polliff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Polliff?
Yes,
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 28-2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item up will be item 29-2022, and this is presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began, and I will defer to Chief Began for any details on this particular item.
Thanks, Mr. President. This is for the purchase of 3 2022 Ford Interceptor police cruisers. We did a trade-in of a total of 4 vehicles, which was 2 cruisers and 2 unmarked vehicles that we're going to be trading in and getting the 3 new cruisers. Ballman did a better quote, beat the state contract by a couple $1,000s per vehicle and gave us a good trade-in. So we think they're the best company to use for this.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions regarding item 29?
Mr. President.
Ms. Pauloff?
This is for Chief Began. Just for my own personal question, how many, now you're getting 3 this year. Is there a loop? I mean, are we looking at, you do so many every year, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep. Yeah, we try to change them out. The 2 cruisers that we're turning in have over 100,000 miles.
okay,
Once they get to that point, the maintenance costs start to go up. And that's about the sweet spot that we found to start trading them in. So 3 this year, and that's, kind of average depending on the wear and tear on our vehicles.
because for some reason, I was thinking it was 4. Wasn't there 4 either last year or the year before?
We did 3 last, yeah, we
Was
did
it 3 last year?
3 last year. It depends, varies on the year,
Mhm.
but right around 3 or 4 per
Okay.
year is what our average need is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Mr. Beasley?
It's just a note in answer to Councilwoman's question. In general, the department would always like to replace more, and I try and slow them down a little, just because of balance out in interest of what it costs. In any given year, it's a balance against, boy, can we get by with those and be safe versus some additional ones? I'd rather replace 5. And a couple of years ago, we did 4, I think 2 years ago is my recollection, as we looked at it. Again, depends on the year, revenues, what the age of them are, and the availability of fleet. It's hard to get, it's hard to get police cruisers some years, and other years a little easier. So it's
Right.
generally where we.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Ms. Pauloff?
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. No, I was, even when I read this earlier, I was like, is it 3 or 4? And when I saw 3, I'm like, oh, I thought it was 4, but if it's 3, it's 3. I just remember us doing more before, so I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
thank you. Chief Began, I know the next ordinance is going to be for the changeovers and that for the vehicles. Approximately, how long do you know how long that usually takes before they're in working condition for us to start using them?
Yeah, we anticipate probably later in the year, probably towards the end of the year by the time we get the vehicles in, because it takes a while to get the vehicles in. Once we get them in, we have to get them striped, put all the decals on there. We have to get them outfitted. They take out the old equipment from the other vehicle that we're trading in. So they take that apart. We use whatever equipment we can in the new vehicles. We can't use all of it, depending on if they change the layout of the vehicle. And so it's a multi-month process. I would imagine probably October. Okay, minimum 30-week for the vehicles.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that long, but thank you for the
It's normally
information.
not that long. It's usually a little bit less, but they're pretty far behind.
Well, I understand that, especially with what we've gone through the last couple of years. The striping and everything is all done there as well?
The striping is done out in Elmore, Vision Quest out in Elmore. And then Evil does the inside,
Okay,
getting everything set up with the cages and computer mounts and gun racks and all that.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 29, 2022 as ordinance 29, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to Bauman Ford Oregon, 2811 Navarre Avenue, Oregon, Ohio, for the purchase of 3 2022 Ford Interceptor SUV vehicles to be used in the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff?
I move for passage of ordinance number 29 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallensack. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Pauloff?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes,
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 29, 2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next up will be item 30, 2022, and this is also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began. And once again, I will defer to Chief Began.
Okay, and this is related to the vehicles. Again, it's the changeover cost to take out the old equipment and re-outfit the new vehicles that come in with everything that they need.
Thank you, Chief. Ebles is basically our only go-to on this right
Correct.
now, right?
Correct.
That's what I thought. Thank you. Council? Hearing no other questions or comments, I will assign item 30, 2022 as ordinance 30, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to DR Evil Police and Fire Equipment, 3203 Woodville Road, Northwood, Ohio, for the 2022 police vehicle equipment purchase and changeovers for the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Council?
Mr. President,
Ms. Paulo?
I move for passage of ordinance number 30 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paulo?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Dabish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 30, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item is item 31, 2022. I will also defer to the chief of police on this particular item also.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Fed Equitable Sharing Program is a program when we work with federal agencies. If there's ever any type of seizures of money or property in these major cases that we participate in with the federal entities, we do get a small portion of that for some of those that they go back, and we're able to use that money to purchase different equipment for law enforcement use. There's some stipulations on what we can spend the money on. And this is just to continue with that. We've been doing it for years. We do have one officer that is currently attached to a task force right now with the FBI. The Violent Fugitive Task Force with the FBI, we previously had an officer with the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, and we do get small portions of that. Usually takes years for the court process to go through and finish up, and then they divide that up and we get a small portion that gets back to us.
Thank you, Chief. Council? Hearing no further questions or comments, I will assign item 31, 2022 as ordinance 31, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and chief of police to approve the annual equitable sharing agreements and certifications with the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of the Treasury to continue participation in the federal equitable sharing program and declaring an emergency.
Council?
Mr. President,
Ms. Paulo?
I move for passage of ordinance number 31 of 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paulo?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Dabish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yep. Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 31, 2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next up is item 32, 2022, and I will also defer this one to Chief of Police Brandon Beacon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Assistant Chief Spangler did a study on the local tow ordinances on what other jurisdictions similar to us and Toledo charge for the police ordered tows, or the amount that would go to the tow companies for police ordered tows. We saw that we were one of the lowest in the area. We were approached by the tow companies, and they said that the cost of business is going up, and their insurance for doing the same type of work has went up. And so we thought it was fair compared to the other rates at the other jurisdictions to go more in line with that and have a small increase in the tow rate, the per day storage rate, and also the tow companies, when there's crashes or debris in the roadway that can make the road slick, they have to, by ordinance, they're required to have Absorball. So you put that down on the ground, it absorbs the oil or any type of spillover from the vehicles makes the roadway safer. They're required to carry that on their vehicle, and they use it quite often for our tows involved with crashes. There was no fee that they would get for using that Absorball. Sometimes it would be a small amount, other times it would be a great amount, and they didn't get any additional above the amount of the tow for that. So we thought it was only fair to add the $25 fee for the Absorball and then increase the rate slightly for the storage fee per day and for the actual tow itself. And this is only for police ordered tows. This doesn't affect other non-police ordered tows for the city.
Thank you, Chief. Two questions. How many tow companies do we have right now that we can use? And when you say it's a small increase, what is kind of the small increase? I don't recall what the original fees were.
Mr. President, the tow increase, we have 3 tow companies, Benny's, Rouse, and Frank's Towing that continually go through the list. And our previous tows were $120 per tow. We're asking for that to go up to $160 per tow. The charge before of per day storage was $15 per day, and we took that up to $25 per day. And then there was no fee for Absorball that was used, and we're asking for that to be $25 fee.
Thank you, Chief. Counsel. Hearing no further comments or questions regarding item 32, I will assign item 32, 2022 as ordinance 32, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing a fee increase for tows, related services, and storage fees charged by Class A towing licensees when ordered by the Oregon Police Division.
Counsel.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 32 of 2022.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Evans, you can take a vote of council, please.
Mrs. Pauloff,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak,
Yes.
Mr. Dabish,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Zale,
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 32, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Council, the next items, 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37 are basically items we do annually. And they are being presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. And I'm going to let Mr. Roman discuss each of these items, and we can discuss them individually, or I mean together, and then we can vote on them individually. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. President. These are annual contracts. It's with consultants that provide testing, engineering, and inspection services for the city throughout the year. Item 33 is Demetrica and Jacobs. They provide tech support, mainly computer services for both treatment plants. Item 34 is with Sullivan Diving. They provide underwater inspection and repair for the water treatment plant, and we've used them for sewer systems as well. Bowser Warner provides construction testing and inspection services, which is item 35. Item 36 is DGL Consulting. They provide traffic engineering support for our engineering department. And then item 37 is quality control inspection, and they provide a lot of our construction inspection services for the city. A lot of times when the new subdivisions go in, they provide work and we get reimbursed by the developers. But that's it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council? Hearing no questions on the following items, I will assign item 33, 2022 as ordinance 33, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into a contract with Demetrica Jacobs Engineers Incorporated, 1101 Research Drive, Toledo, Ohio, to provide professional engineering services and technical support for the Oregon water and wastewater treatment plants, supervisory control and data acquisition systems on an as-needed basis and declaring an emergency.
Council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish?
I move for passage of ordinance 33 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wellenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 33, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item is I will assign item 34, 2022 as ordinance 34, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into a contract with Solomon Diving Incorporated, 6450 Sadler Road, Monroe, Michigan, for diving inspection services on an as-needed basis and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 34 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wellenzak?
Yes.
Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 34, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next, I will assign item 35, 2022 as ordinance 35, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into a contract with Bowser Warner, 1419 Miami, Toledo, Ohio, for materials and laboratory testing, engineering, and construction inspection services on an as-needed basis and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 35 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please, on item 30 or ordinance 35?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wellenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 35, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next one is sign item 36, 2022 as ordinance 36, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into a contract with DGL Consulting Engineers LLC, 3455 Briarfield Boulevard, Suite E, Maumee, Ohio, to provide professional engineering services for various traffic analyses on an as-needed basis and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 36 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, you take a vote of council, please.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wellenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 36, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next, I will assign item 37, 2022 as ordinance 37, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into a contract with Quality Control Inspection Incorporated, 9500 North Avenue, Garfield Heights, Ohio, to provide construction inspection services on an as-needed basis and declare an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 37 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Davish. Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wellenzak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 37, 2022 passes by 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next up would be item 38, 2022, also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed for the purchase of a raw sewage pump for the wastewater treatment plant. We did receive 3 quotes, and North Shore Pump was the lowest and best quote. And the purchase was included in the 2022 budget as well. So,
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions for Mr. Roman? Hearing none, I will assign item 38, 2022 as ordinance 38, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to DXP Enterprises Incorporated, doing business as Corporate Equipment Company in North Shore Pump and Equipment Company, a DXP company, PO Box 1697, Houston, Texas, for the purchase of an Aurora Model 613A size 8x8x15 pump to be used by the wastewater treatment plant in the Department of Public Service in an amount not to exceed $31,504 and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 38 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second?
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 38, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman is item 39, 2022. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this ordinance is needed for additional engineering design for the Oregon Town Center project. In particular, boxes 1 and 2 are the areas closest to Navarre. So far, OHM had done the design just north of Pickle, and you see that construction ongoing right now. This is now public roads that would be within the old Kmart site and surrounding it. The scope of services and costs are included in Exhibit A. Bulk of the work is really road and utility design. If you look at the map, I don't know, Tina, if you can put that up. It really involves our extending of our Oregon Town Center Boulevard, which is the residential area, coming up into what we call Box 2 before Dustin Road. And then, there you go. And along the east side of what was the Kmart site, we're calling it just Street F, would be a true public road, utilities, water lines, sewer, and so on. There are a lot of utilities available already through Isaac Streets Drive, Navarre, and Dustin, but F would definitely have to have other water and sewer utilities. And Street G, which is the east-west road, that it is a question whether that would be public or not, or private. G is short for Marvin Gardens, is the plan name for it. And happy to answer any of the questions.
Council. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. Roman, I believe I know the answer to this question, but this work is just for the design work this year, and we'd look to build these, this infrastructure out in the years to come.
Yeah, Mr. President, Mr. Wallenzeck, yeah, and there is, if you look in the scope of services, some of the design is working in coordination with the development of the site, because there's still some unknowns, just the footprints of buildings and where the utilities go and everything else that we need to do. We think even off of Navarre, there may be a need of a drop lane to come in, I think, for public events. And just like Dustin, where we had the farmer's market, we think Dustin should be widened to a degree. And if you have public functions, again, the Oregon Town Center, the idea of a green space there, having, weekends, bands, any type of entertainment, Dustin Road could be closed off for that type of work. So even electrical drops and anything else that you need to provide for this is included here. So there's kind of some unknowns based on what the developer's needs are. I just know that like Street F definitely would need to be a public road, as well as its extension to the residential portion to make it one, continuous road. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Council, any further questions? Comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 39, 2022 as ordinance 39, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and public service director to assign amendment number 1 with OHM Advisors, 388 South Main Street, Suite 301, Akron, Ohio. Provide professional and planning and engineering services for Harbor Drive Extension, Oregon Town Center Project Phase 2 in an amount not to exceed $415,000 and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 39 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenzeck. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Ms. Evans, would you take a vote from council, please?
Mr. Horniak.
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack,
Yes.
Mr. Davish,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock,
yes,
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Zale,
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 39, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. And this completes our council agenda for the evening on ordinances. And next I will go to the mayor's report. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have much to report other than you've seen this picture for our town center. Our interests are really escalating. We are in conversations with different businesses daily. We believe in about 2 weeks, we'll have some announcements that we can make solid. And we feel good about that. Remember, from the beginning, we knew for us to develop retail in our city was something that was going to take a lot of strategy, because we needed something that could sustain and stay in business and be supported by the numbers we have in our community. We stayed with that all during this time. It meant that it would slow some of the progress down a bit, but we thought we're going in for the long haul and wanted to see it succeed and each of the businesses succeed. Going slowly and cautiously was the best avenue to travel. So we hope that we can get information to you on announcements maybe in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And that's the first time we actually had a number that I could say that, other than that, say, it's coming, it's
Yeah,
coming.
yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And
What's that?
I know there's some frustration with that you hear through the community about the development of the area, and a lot of people don't seem to understand
Just how difficult.
how difficult it is for our city like us has not been in this game for years and years and years and years. And a couple other cities around us have been in this game, and they service, as Mr. Beasley will probably tell you here in a minute, a whole lot more people than we do. And they've established themselves as a commercial business type of city, and we have not for years. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I think everything that's come here so far that I've seen has succeeded very well. So I have all the confidence in the world that what we get will work very well.
And thank you. I did, and they did make you aware of, I have retirement
Yes.
resignation to ask you to approve or actually concur with the acceptance of Station Chief Andy Riker from Station 41. And his retirement resignation date would be February. The Mark LeBoon, I'm sorry. It's from Andy Riker. Mark LeBoon from Station. Huh? Yeah. That's what happens when I don't bring my glasses.
and
I'm really struggling to see some of the words. So I actually, once again, Mark LeBoon retiring from Station 41, effective date February 26th. And I council's concurrence in accepting the retirement resignation from Mark LeBoon.
Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Poloff.
I move to concur, excuse me, with the mayor's acceptance of the retiring of Mark LeBoon effective February 26th.
Thank you, Ms. Poloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallensack. Are there any objections, council? Thank you, council. Mr. Mayor, council does concur with you.
Okay, with that, I would conclude my report.
Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President, members, just a note, if in case any people didn't notice, we had another round of storms recently. I just want to again thank our crews and our leadership in the streets department. I had the opportunity to drive around a lot of communities the day of the storm, and I felt like, or the snow. I don't want to be in the business of calling every snow event a storm, but it was. I really feel like our crews just has stayed ahead of it all year, and hopefully we're on the home stretch and getting out of it as meteorological spring begins tomorrow. Other notes, we did have a rough round of challenges with, we've had a rough, just a few week period with water line breaks and we're obviously continuing to upgrade our system. There's some things we're going to be looking at to continue that investment, but it was, the crews did a great job of dealing with things on challenging short notice, and we got some streets crews involved as well, and we felt like the teams did a great job getting it done. There is lots, as the mayor started out, there's lots going to be happening here, really on citywide projects we've worked on for a lot of years. Our new roadway in Industrial Park is going to be, it actually started now. It's ongoing now. Really kind of connecting Windscape with Cedar Point Industrial Park. Our Coy Navarre is really ripening again. It's been planning forever. It's happening this year in terms of things that are going on. Our bike trails are going out and going on this year. So it's a year where we've got a lot happening. So just be aware of that. We will get there. New construction does lead to some disruption and delay, but the end product is really worth the investment of time, and we'll work through it. I'm also, and I know that Paul Shop did send a note out. I know I asked him to. I feel like the sign on 280 from ODOT creates the impression that Route 2 closes when it's, miles east of town, and it's an impression that we're trying to deal with. So we've got a request into ODOT, let folks know, we worry about its impact on our residents. Our own residents will know the story there, but that mile marker doesn't mean much to any of us when you look at it. I'm pretty good at where everything is, and I think, hey, where is that? So we're trying to describe that in a better way. Putting it on our website and that sort of thing will be good, but it really is the casual traveler that's coming through town that we're concerned about not knowing where it is. So we're working with ODOT to improve that communication there, just so folks know, and we'll get stuff on our website. It creates the impression that, boy, I can't get off here when it's, way outside of town, and you have plenty of routes. If I'm heading toward the islands or something, I can head out east through Oregon and still get out in a rational way. So just be aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Mr. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Purpura. Mr. Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a small report from our standing committee. I want to thank Tim Borton and Hank Fox for their update on our spring and sports, summer sports programs for this upcoming year, and also for the guidance that they're going to do with the upgrading of our restroom facility at the baseball complex. So thank you, guys. Really appreciate the update, and I know it was very informative, and appreciate when you guys come in and give us the update like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Reeves.
President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenczak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mr. Davish.
No report, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Pauloff.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Mr. Horniak.
I'm just going to echo what both the mayor and Mr. Beasley had said as well. With the town center development, it is fun to have plans and things to review and site plans to be considered and discussed and traffic flows. So we are at that point where things will start to happen. So I think we all feel good about that. It has been a steady and slow process with the pandemic mixed in the middle. But I think people will be really excited with what we've got coming down the road. So with that, I close. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And I have nothing for my standing committee. However, council, we have to set several public hearings here. And the first will be for Monday, March 14th at 7 p.m. And all of these are just renewals for agricultural district. All the information is posted online, and council has all this information. So I'm merely going to read the names of the people that are asking for renewal for this evening. And the first up would be David Keebler for 955 Stadium Road. We have 19 of these, by the way. The next will be for Donald L. Meyer. We have one for Raymond J. Romstadt, trustee et al. We have one for R. Rowe Collective Holdings, LLC. One for Douglas M. Nelson et al. We have one for Anna L. Nelson. Charles F. Isham, trustee. Janet M. Romstad. Ivan C. and Margie C. Myers, trustees. Ivan C. Jr. and Amy Sue Myers. Bruce C. Miller. Luann E. Spurl. William E. and Donna S. Nelson. Gail H. and Sandra K. Grove, trustees. Carolyn J. Pate. David P. Furry, Sr. Dax LLC. Cole A. Lovequist. And Deborah A. Lovequist. Council?
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish?
I move to conduct a public hearing as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Second by Ms. Pauloff. Any objections, council? Okay, those public hearings will be set for March 14th at 7 p.m. That's coming up. That's coming up. Okay, also, public hearing needs to be set for, we have two of them for Monday, March 28th. And this will be a application for SUE 17422 for a special use in an R1 low-density residential district for the purpose of having 4 horses and 20 chickens on the property described as parcel number 4438-921. The applicant owner is Kelly Clark. Location is 6450 Corduroy. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to conduct a public hearing as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Second by Ms. Pauloff. Council, any objections? Public hearing for Kelly Clark will be set for Monday, March 28th at 7 p.m. The second one for March 28th at 7 p.m. will be amending Part 11 of the Planning and Zoning Code by establishing a new chapter 1145 of the Oregon Municipal Code titled Advanced Manufacturing District. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move to conduct the public hearing as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Second by Ms. Pauloff. Council, are there any objections? This public hearing will be set for Monday, March 28th, 2022. That concludes my report. Signed in to speak before council tonight would be Mr. Steven Solander. Steve, you want to come to the podium? Give us your name and address for the record, please.
But I do commend the, the streets department and, guys out there who guys are Thanks. And it was nice to see some video. Also, I didn't know the market drives no problem. But, another question really was just kind of just a question. I know this is a little bit on the 911. I'm sure all of you are aware. All over the last several weeks, there's been some conditions. The wrong address and a few other things out there as well. And so my question was kind of curiosity if there's anything that, or any plans or any thoughts of what we're doing as a city to kind of maybe push a little bit of a direction or, something that we could do to try to help get along. And because I think the biggest human error was probably when they wrote that in. That was human error. But anyway, so we are where we are. I just was curious on your thoughts. If there was any plans or anything. I know Mr. B.
Sure. Yep. Mr. Salader, I'll just say, like we talked before, I said, I think you know that everybody in this room is not real happy that we went this direction. There's nothing we can do about it. I think we rely an awful lot on Chief Vegan to work with 911 and see where we can see what the problems are. I think we're doing all we can. We rely an awful lot on what the county does. I would, like I said to you before, I don't know if you've thought about approaching the commissioners yourself. I don't know if you've done that. Have you talked to them? Have you gone to one of their meetings? Can you? Okay. 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 But you know our feelings. And I know. Yeah. 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 Chief, do you have any data?
Mr. President, yeah, anytime that there's any concerns, we have meetings with them, the COG meetings. Any issues that come up, we email them immediately after it happens or as soon as we find out about it. They're very good about getting back with us quickly and correcting whatever actions. There's been a few things that we've sent over and we said, hey, we would like to change the way it's done for Oregon. We can't change what's done for the entire county, but they're very open to it. And during the meetings, we have our opportunity. So any issues that we've sent over to them, they've come back with a correction or an explanation as to why things are the way they are. So they're very good to work with. They're open for suggestions on how to change things, and it's working. For our normal daily use, it's getting better and better as it goes on. Of course, there's going to be some growing pains, which we've talked about before, but every day, if you listen to the radio, it's better and better, and we're happy with the service right now.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Beasley, do you have something?
I was just going to note that we do find, we work through our police and fire chiefs on it, and that they have been happy with the service. There are times and ending that they have had questions, and I think they've responded, and Brandon just said it well. I know that I talked to Sylvania's Safety Service Director this week, and he felt good about the service. He know they had a human error incident there, but he feels good about the service, and he feels like it's improving. Like anything else, we wish everything was perfect. We know there's times it's not. I know that any system that depends on people or technology is going to have an error rate. Our goal and job is to build systems so that minimizes it to the smallest number possible. I know that when it was here, we had an error rate. And I want to know when it was in other communities, they had error rates. We didn't talk about it as much, but it was real.
Understand.
Our goal, though, is to have systems so it's the lowest possible error. I know a certain percentage things I do, I get wrong during the day.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Other than you and
obviously, if
I,
you have
everyone
a
else makes
human-
mistakes.
Oh, of course. Right. Yeah, you got it. But,
So that just be where we work through the police and fire chiefs.
Sure.
And that's where we depend on them to be on the front line.
Sure. And I've been trying to also attend, I know I was at the one meeting where
Sure.
you were at, and there's one coming up in March also that I'm planning on being at also. So,
Okay, thanks.
yep.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Salander. Council, any further business?
Mr. President, I got a question.
Mr.
for,
Gregg.
Mr. Beasley. Mike, when does the water bills come out next?
Think about monthly.
Every
to a
month,
different
every
quarter of the
depending on,
city, so
it's a rolling.
There's 3
group-
cycles.
So they get it every 3 months.
Correct.
Is there any way, because I'm still running into people on what number to call for the non-emergency number? I know the one day it was one of them where it started snowing at 6:30 in the morning, and she slid through, I think it was Picklein Stadium, and she called whatever non-emergency she thought it was, and it just,
There's a phone tree, so where you at?
I
with
have
the
no,
water?
everybody I've talked to have been confused
Oh,
with
I
it.
see.
So
We will do another,
I hear it's 698-7064. That's just because I worked here for
Right.
34 years.
Still
But the
works.
average person
It still
sitting
works.
at home
Yeah.
has no idea.
Yeah, we could use the water bill.
still
to
works.
explain that.
we'll do that. It still works. We have had a for non-emergency calls off hours, it's been depending on the nature of the call, a phone tree that's been in place for many years. The COG will also enter in the circumstances as well. We'll go through it again and see if we can use our phone bills as a way of reaching out on it.
Mr. Beasley, I would suggest we also reach out to our friends in social media to put it out through social media.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any further business? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to
Mr.
adjourn,
President?
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak,
sorry. Move to adjourn, Mr. President.
second by
Second.
Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Council, any objections? Meeting is adjourned.
Things like baseball season is going to start. Will there be only March Madness?